Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to NAUI's Dive Team Report. I'm your host, Greg Martin. You know, we haven't really touched on one of the big elephants in the room here on the NAUI podcast, but I figured it was probably time to get to it, and that is the problem of plastic in our oceans and how we can help mitigate that issue. Every time I go to the beach anywhere, I always take a bag with me, and I'm always picking things up. A few years back, there was a wonderful book released by Captain Charles Moore called The Plastic Ocean. Just captivated me and fascinated me. He discusses the findings about the Pacific Ocean, the plastic in there. We'll talk more about that here in just a minute. He is the founder of the Algalita Marine Research and Education Foundation. But Katie Allen, who's the executive director of Algalita, has joined us today. So what is Algalita, Katie?
So Algalita, we're a nonprofit organization Captain Moore founded back in 1994, initially to study disappearing kelp forests off of the coast of California. Now, it wasn't until 97 when he sailed through the area in the North Pacific, most commonly known as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It wasn't until that time that he actually changed the entire focus of the organization to focus on plastic in the ocean, mainly out in these gyres. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. We're monitoring plastic out there 1,000 miles from land, but we're also monitoring plastic here in our hometown of Long Beach to make the connection between what's happening on land and where it's ending up in the ocean. This problem is happening all over the world. The world has 5 main oceanic gyres, and what oceanic gyres are they are areas where the surface currents create almost these vortex areas. There are these massive areas where trash accumulates. There's multiple accumulation areas, but the 5 main gyres are in North Pacific, South Pacific, North Atlantic, South Atlantic, and the Indian. So this is indeed all over the world. We focus on the North Pacific because it's closest to where we live. We've been monitoring it for the past 15 years. However, this year is the first time that we're headed down to the South Pacific. So we have an expedition. It's starting in November. We're opening it to the public. There are opportunities for individuals to participate, to come on board. There's multiple legs. So it allows people to tailor their experience with us. We're going to be going down to the South Pacific, looking at plastics near the Galapagos, Easter Island, the coast of Chile, and then within the South Pacific Gyre, which would be the counterpart of what we see in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It would be called the Great South Pacific Garbage Patch, if you will.
So I had somebody the other day, we were discussing this, and they're like, well, why don't they just take a big ship out there and just pick all that plastic up and, bring it back and dump it or something? That's just not an issue. People don't understand, do they?
They don't. We wish it was that easy. But the fact of the matter is, as plastic travels in these ocean currents, the sun dries it out. It's called photo degradation. And I'm sure you've experienced that. If you've had a bucket or something that's been sitting in your yard for months or years, it becomes brittle and it will just break into pieces when you try to pick it up. And the same thing is happening to the plastic trash that's in the ocean. It's becoming brittle, so it's breaking down into these tiny, tiny pieces. In fact, the majority of trash, plastic trash in the ocean, is smaller than the size of a grain of rice. So when you start to understand, you start to see pictures and understand how this is now within these ecosystems that's so finely meshed into the available food source in the ocean, you can start to understand why going out with nets is not really a feasible option. We have literally changed the composition of the surface waters in these areas.
So what you're basically saying is plastic is being mistaken for a food source by a lot of the marine life, yes?
Oh, absolutely, especially because of the way that it's breaking down. We focus on the lanternfish. There are 240 species of lanternfish in the world's ocean. They actually account for 55% of all global fish biomass. So they are the fish. And what we found in the North Pacific is that 35% of the lanternfish in that area are ingesting plastic. They're coming up from the depths looking for the plankton-sized food that they typically eat, and they are ingesting the plastic. And so it's threatening their survival. And that's actually one of the main reasons we're going to the South Pacific, is because if we are asked all of the time, what is a tipping point? How much plastic can we keep putting out there until we start to see maybe ecological collapse in some areas? And for us, it's a very difficult question to answer. However, we know investigating marine life, and specifically the lanternfish, since they make up such a significant portion of the food chain, may give us some answers sooner than later.
So let's kind of cut to the chase here, Katie. With all this issue going on, what can the average person I mean, obviously we all have to pull together to fix this issue. I mean, what does the average person do to help this issue?
So there are a lot of different people involved. The average person, the everyday person, it's really as simple as rethinking single-use plastic in your own life. What we're seeing is the majority of plastic on the beaches and in the ocean, it's the single-use stuff that we use that we need to start rethinking, like the straws, the utensils, the plastic bags, the styrofoam clamshells we take home from restaurants. The majority of what we see are things like that. And so for us, really going back to using reusable water bottles, using reusable bags, bringing a container to restaurants. And what's been really, really neat over the past 5 or 6 years is we've really started to see a movement happening. In fact, so much so there have been enough people that have started to rethink and bring reusables and rethink plastic that even some of the industry and different distributors and companies are starting to rethink their position in this issue as well, where we know that some of the biggest changes will happen when companies start to redesign products to be more valuable so they're recovered and recycled, to be less harmful for the environment. Even something as simple as leashing a bottle cap to a bottle could make a huge difference because those bottle caps are falling off, they're being lost, they're being ingested. So redesign right now for industry is something that is the most important thing for them to focus on. And the only way that that is going to happen is if the individual demands that, and if we demand it through rethinking our use of single-use plastics.
I want to jump back to something you were talking about a little bit ago. You talked about you were actually opening up one of your trips to the average person. Talk a little bit about that. How can somebody get involved in that if they want to take part?
So we just opened the opportunity up a couple weeks ago. We have our final schedule. The first leg, it's going from Long Beach to the Galapagos. That first leg starts November 2nd. And then from then, there are multiple legs. I think there's about, maybe 14 different ones over the course of 6 months. So, some of the most expensive ones, one would be the one going to the South Pacific Gyre. That's a 23-day expedition. So that one's around $12,000. It's a little expensive, but there are a lot of people that are dying to get out to these accumulation areas to really see it up close and personal. People who are working on documentaries, people who are change makers, scientists, even just your everyday person. And then there are legs that are much less expensive along the coast of Chile. We have a couple that are about $2,500. And what's really neat about this expedition is you will be able to sail with Captain Moore on the vessel that made history in the North Pacific. This was the vessel that he discovered the Great Pacific Garbage Patch on. And this is the vessel that he has been, going out to the North Pacific for the past 15 years. It's a very, very intimate experience with him. There's only room for about 3 to 4 people on the vessel per leg. So they're starting to fill up quickly. But if anybody is interested, all of the information is on our website, which is Algalita. It's ALGALITA.org.
Katie, I wish you guys all the best. If you haven't had a chance to pick up a copy of The Plastic Ocean, be sure and do so. It's a fascinating read and very eye-opening as well. I'm assuming copies are still available.
They are, yeah, and you can get copies on our website. Actually, they're signed by Captain Moore if you get them on our site.
Katie, thank you so much for sharing with us, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And if you are interested in getting involved, the NAUI also has our Green Diver program, which looks at a lot of these issues as well, trash cleanups and many, many more. Be sure and check out Green Diver as part of the NAUI.org website. And that's this episode of NAUI's Dive Team Report. I'm Greg Martin. Thank you for being here. Thanks for listening. I'll see you underwater.